On Friday, the 20th of July 2018, just after sunset, London moved as it always did. Traffic murmured along the A13, buses sighed at every stop, and Battersea's riverfront flickered with the orange of sodium lights. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing to suggest that one of the flats on Battery Street held something no one was ever supposed to find. Inside, the air was still, curtains drawn, a faint chemical scent hung in the hall. Neighbors had called it in after days of silence, a smell that didn't belong in summer. When officers from the Metropolitan Police forced the door, their torches sliced through the darkness and found a sight that would rewrite a city map. Dozens of black bin bags lined the living room walls. Each one was carefully knotted, sealed tight, stacked in perfect order. When the first bag was cut open, silence filled the flat. Inside, pink, powdery parcels, wrapped and marked with candy emojis. The kind you'd expect from a party shop, not a drug operation. It wasn't just the quantity that shocked them, it was the branding. Neatly printed labels, candy names, logos, a business model. For detectives, this wasn't a street bust. It was a glimpse into something new, an organized, tech-savvy network built on branding and precision. Evidence tags filled the flat by midnight. By morning, forensic officers counted 217 kilos of product, all disguised as sweet deliveries. 3 years later, that single flat would become the first domino in a case that pulled apart one of the most advanced criminal supply chains London had ever seen. Because that night's discovery wasn't a mistake. It was a symptom of a city quietly feeding an empire hidden in plain sight. By early 2020, London's night riders were changing. The Deliveroo jackets were real, the bikes were legal, but what rode inside those pink rucksacks wasn't food. They called themselves the Candy Shop, a network that turned the chaos of lockdown into a logistics machine. Each rider had a color code, each delivery had a phrase. You didn't buy drugs, you ordered flavors. And every flavor came with a smiley face emoji. At first glance, it looked harmless. To anyone watching from a window, it was just another wave of late-night takeaway deliveries. But behind the friendly branding was a digital fortress, built on EncroChat, an encrypted messaging platform once thought to be unbreakable. The Candy Shop network was led by a man called Thiago de Lima, a 32-year-old with dual passports, a soft accent, and a business background in logistics. On paper, he was a consultant. In reality, he ran one of the most efficient distribution systems the city had ever seen, except it wasn't for parcels. It was for product. De Lima's operation didn't look like the old-school gangs. No bravado, no flashy cars, no shouting in nightclubs. Just silent structure and spreadsheets. Every member had a handle, every handle a task. Sugar Boss, Pink Drop, Mint Man, each name linked to a route, a schedule, and a coded bank account. From Manchester to London, couriers moved like clockwork. They wore the same jackets, carried the same bags, spoke the same few words. To anyone outside, they were invisible, part of the city's rhythm. But to detectives reading decrypted EncroChat messages 2 years later, it all read like a corporate playbook. In one chat, de Lima bragged about efficiency. We're faster than Amazon, same day no returns. In another, a lieutenant complained about riders being too polite to clients. De Lima replied, polite sells, fear doesn't. Each order came through coded terms. 2 sweets meant 2 ounces. Half bag meant 500 grams. Payments moved through cryptocurrency wallets, bounced through offshore shells, and came back as consultancy fees. When one of the riders was stopped in Camden in late 2020, his pink backpack contained nothing illegal, only sealed candy boxes, perfectly wrapped. But when police opened the boxes under forensic light, They saw traces of residue along the edges, just enough to connect the packaging to the original Battery Street seizure 2 years earlier. For months, surveillance teams mapped their routes, traced rental scooters, and monitored burner phones that never stayed on longer than 6 minutes. But nothing tied back to DeLima, not until a single mistake on EncroChat. A photo, posted by a user called Sweet Lord. A mirrored selfie in a kitchen, taken just after midnight. In the reflection behind him, a rare Brazilian football jersey, a detail that would matter more than anyone realized. That image was the thread, and pulling it would unravel the whole operation. In early 2020, as COVID spread and the streets fell silent, investigators across Europe were reading the messages of criminals who thought they were invisible. Operation Venetic had quietly cracked the encryption that kept networks like the candy shop alive. Every message, every photo, every file recorded, timestamped, traceable. When they started piecing together the usernames, one stood out: Sweet Lord. The same handle seen in the selfie, with the Brazilian jersey. Cross-referencing cell towers placed that phone in London, then Croydon, then, on one night in February, in Battersea. The same area where the 2018 raid had begun. It was no longer theory, it was lineage. Detectives followed the digital trail backwards. A payment of £32,000 to a courier in Manchester. A meeting in a parking lot off Seven Sisters Road. A transfer to a logistics company registered in Sao Paulo. Each breadcrumb pointed to DeLima, the consultant who wasn't a consultant, the man who turned encryption into empire. One investigator later described it. They thought the screen protected them, but the screen hid the evidence. By the end of 2020, the network stretched through London, Birmingham, and Liverpool, all routed through the same code phrases, the same emoji menus. Every week, hundreds of encrypted orders flowed like clockwork. Until the morning, everything stopped. 22nd February 2021. At dawn, 4 addresses across London were hit within minutes. Doors splintered, radios cracked alive. The candy shop network, months in the making, was over in less than an hour. Inside DeLima's flat, detectives found what they'd expected: encrypted phones, ledgers, and £180,000 in cash. But what they hadn't expected were the ledgers. Neatly bound, labeled deliveries. Dates, names, and routes. It wasn't criminal chaos, it was corporate precision. The same pink rucksacks were stacked by the wall, still smelling faintly of sugar. Some filled with candy boxes, some empty, all branded. In total, 26 people were arrested across 3 cities. Half of them had legitimate day jobs: baristas, drivers, web designers. All of them part of a structure that treated crime like customer service. As one officer put it, they built an empire on professionalism. That's what made them dangerous. But Venetic didn't just end the candy shop. It exposed dozens of networks built on the same illusion: anonymity through encryption. For every phone cracked, another world appeared behind it. One of them reached all the way to Brazil. By 2022, the trials were underway. Thiago DeLima sat in the dock at Suffolk Crown Court, silent, expressionless, his hands folded neatly on the table. Behind him, screens displayed the evidence: chat logs, photos, ledger pages. In message after message, his empire played back like a film. One prosecutor called it the most polite criminal network in Britain. The defense called it entrepreneurship gone wrong. Neither argument could change the facts. DeLima was sentenced to 21 years in prison. His lieutenants received between 10 and 14. Dozens of riders walked free on probation, their cooperation earning reduced terms. But one story still haunted the investigation: the link between London and Sao Paulo. His name was Luan Monteiro, a 25-year-old father from Brazil. He wasn't a gangster. He wasn't even supposed to be in the game. Luan had taken a job as a courier, promised £3,000 to travel to London carrying documents. He never made it past Heathrow. Customs officers found him unconscious in the arrivals hall. When doctors opened his stomach, they found 94 pellets, each stamped with the same candy logos found in Battersea Street 3 years earlier. Luan survived barely. In his statement, he said, "They told me it was safe. They said everyone does it. They said I'd be home in a week." He wasn't lying. He was a pawn in the same network that had rebranded crime into customer service. The candy shop had sold London a fantasy: quick money, hidden messages, risk-free delivery. But every delivery had a cost, and someone somewhere always paid it. When the final sentences were read in 2023, one detective stood outside the courthouse and said quietly to a reporter, "This was never about drugs. It was about systems. They built a machine and forgot it was made of people." In the months that followed, the empty flats of Battersea Street were boarded up. The pink rucksacks were bagged and stored in evidence lockers. The phones, those encrypted devices once thought untouchable, sat on shelves, silent, their screens cracked, their passwords meaningless. But for investigators, one thought remained. If encryption could build an empire, it could build another. Because every time police learn the code, someone new writes a different one. And maybe that's the truth about modern crime. It doesn't disappear, it just updates. From a single flat in Battersea to global encryption networks, the candy shop story isn't just about drugs. It's about innovation, illusion, and inevitability. The smarter the system, the smaller the mistake needed to break it. In the end, what brought down the candy shop wasn't violence or betrayal. It was vanity, a mirrored selfie, a digital fingerprint, a moment of arrogance. And from that single reflection, an empire collapsed. So next time you see a pink rucksack glide through London traffic, you might think twice. Because sometimes the most ordinary things, a backpack, a smiley emoji, a sweet wrapper, hide the most extraordinary crimes. This was the Candy Shop Network. One city, one encryption. And one rule that never changes: every empire leaves a trail. If you found this story compelling, make sure you subscribe for more cases just like this. The hidden empires, the encrypted deals, and the real investigations that shaped modern Britain's underworld. Hit the like button, turn on the notification bell, and let us know in the comments. Do you think encrypted phones will ever truly make criminals invisible? This is Encrypted UK, where story begins with a secret and ends with the truth.